Another week of better planning, better outcome, just helping nonprofits to be able to prove their impact, prove all the amazing stuff that you guys do. We actually only have 6 more weeks left, 6 more weeks of material to actually go over. And it's been an honor just to be able to go through all of this content with you guys. And we will most definitely be doing something else, another virtual series following this one. But we're going to be going through just these 6 more weeks. And just to be able to finish out the entire series to really help you guys to paint this holistic picture of proving your impact and what you guys are doing. So last week we talked about logic models, and the question that we were trying to answer was, what did you do in order to get the impacts? So one of the first questions that we talked about, well, how do you know you have that impact? But just because you know how you can answer how you know doesn't mean you can answer what did you do to get there. And it's equally important to figure out what did you do to get there. And that was the essence and the importance and the necessity of logic models. But this week, we're going to talk about help. And I want to preface it with this. When I'm training in leadership, as I've been training in leadership, really since I've been in high school, I've learned, if there's one thing that I've learned, it's this, that I always need help. I always need advice. I always need someone walking along beside me. I always need someone walking in front of me. And I always need someone really even behind me to push me along. But the reality is that I never get to this place of being truly independent. I'm actually always dependent on someone or something. And that I preface that because we always need some type of help. And so the reason why I preface it is that when we're going through this time and this part of this series, I don't want you to get to this place of, okay, we're doing all this stuff to get to this place of true independence where we never need any help. That is a fallacy. That's actually not true. If we stop needing help, then we reach this place of stagnation in which that we're only going to regress and we're not going to progress. I think the heart of progression is really being able to seek help. But the thing about leadership is that as you grow, the help just changes. The type of help changes. You're not always going to need just the same help as everyone, and that's okay. But you're always going to need help, but the type of help is going to change. And so what we're going to be doing over the next 4 weeks is going through 4 different stages that have to do with where as an organization are you at? What type of help do you need? And so the 4 different stages, the first one is I do, you watch, and we talk. And so as I go through these stages, these are just different stages that I've learned through leadership and people that have been training me. So the first stage is I do, you watch, we talk. The second is I do, you help, we talk. The third one is you do, I help, we talk. And the final one is you do, I watch, and we talk. And so today we're going to be going over the first stage, which is I do, you watch, and we talk. And this is actually how I started out when it comes to training and becoming a leader, is that I had to watch the example of the person that was training me. And that was the essence of really watching, is looking at their example, seeing how they live their life, seeing how they address conflict or how they navigate conflict analysis type and conflict resolution type of scenarios. For me, it was even thinking about diplomacy and being an ambassador and figuring out how do they navigate those conversations? What's the best way to be able to speak to someone that's in a political arena rather than someone that is sort of in a nonprofit, or rather than someone that has no type of knowledge of any of those things? How do I change up my dialect, or how do I change up how I speak to those people? And so I had to learn that through simply watching. And it came from this idea of I do, you watch, we talk, where the person, they would do it, I would watch them, and then we would end up sitting down and talking. And so there's really good practicals to be able to figure out if you as an organization are in this stage. Because if you're in this stage, this is that stage where I will do a lot of the work and let you watch everything I'm doing, so that ultimately then at the end we can end up talking about it to be able to help you guys progress. And the reason why I love these stages is it helps in building this building this up to this place where you are able to do it yourself. Not as a place complete independence, but a place where I'm working myself out of a job to where you guys are able to do a lot of this stuff yourselves, and someone's able to assist you alongside there, but just at a different capacity. And so that's why I like this, because it really models after that more so. So the I do, you watch, we talk mentality is what we're going to be going over. I think a good question to ask first to figure out if you're at that stage or your organization is at that stage is this: on a scale from 1 to 10, how strong is your organization in evaluating your programs? On a scale from 1 to 10, how strong is your organization in evaluating programs? You want to figure out how strong you are at actually doing the evaluation of what you're going about doing for the programs or the events that you're doing. Just because you may be evaluating them doesn't mean that you would regard or see yourself as being strong in them. And so you want to figure out if you're actually strong in those programs. I think a really good example is a lot of my friends, they do a lot of physical fitness, so they're a lot of physical trainers. And so one of the things that they tell me is that just because you're doing a workout over and over again doesn't mean you're getting stronger. Because if you're not doing the workout that's actually tailored to your body type to assist in your growth, where you're actually just not growing at all, you're just doing some work. And so just because we're able to evaluate stuff doesn't mean that you would necessarily be strong in that. And so you want to ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong am I? But at the same time, you also want to ask on a scale from 1 to 10, how often does your organization already evaluate your programs? So how often does your organization already evaluate your programs? Because if you're not already doing it, then there's a good chance that you might not be in a place where you can evaluate yourself or evaluate those programs yourself or by yourself in your organization. And a part of this is true when it comes to over time, you end up gaining experience. And I say that's a partial truth because sometimes you have to be doing the right type of work. But ultimately, there is some truth in over time, as you do it more and more, you gain more experience. And so that's why I think you should ask your organization the question, how often does your organization already evaluate your programs? So those are really two good questions to go through. And then just continuing, another question to ask is on a scale from 1 to 10, how strong do donors think your organization is in evaluating your programs? So not only how based off your perception, how strong is your organization, but based off the donor's perception. And how do you figure that out? Well, a good way to figure that out is based off the questions that the donor asked you. So a good example is right now, we are in the process for Hope for Kids, one of the organizations I work for. We're in the process of putting together a presentation for city officials. Because we just were granted $150,000 and we want to be granted basically double that. And so we're in the process of putting together a presentation. And so one of the things that the officials asked us was, can you make sure that you have statistics and evaluative tools on everything you've done so we can see if you're worth it or not to be able to give this extra money to? I use that as an example because that actually shows how much they actually see our strength in evaluating programs. The fact that they have to ask means that we probably haven't done it in the past, and that's okay. So they don't know if we're actually strong in it, which means that we're probably not that strong in their eyes because they've never seen it. If they didn't have to ask, then we would know, no, that they'd probably see us as pretty strong in evaluating because they know we're going to provide it. So the fact of the matter is, because they had to ask, we're probably just not necessarily as strong as we can be from their perception. Now, once we have that presentation and we're able to see how they take it from their perspective, then we're able to figure out that answer a little bit more of how strong we are in evaluating from the donor's perspective. So our donors specifically are the city officials. And so that is a good example of how you can figure out that answer. And hopefully that's helpful. And I think last question that you can ask is, on a scale from 1 to 10, how experienced is your organization at evaluating your program? So when I say experienced, I mean mature in knowledge. So how much knowledge do you have on evaluations? And that knowledge can be two different ways to think about it. You can have theoretical knowledge and you can have implementative knowledge or implementation knowledge. Those are two different ways. I can have the theory, which is awesome. I absolutely need the theoretical knowledge first to be able to apply it sometimes. And so you want to figure out on a scale of 1 to 10, how much knowledge do you have about evaluating? Because sometimes we can just have the theoretical knowledge, but it doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be able to apply it right. And so you want to have that implementation knowledge as well. And so you just want to ask, how experienced are you in evaluating programs? And ultimately, as you get the answers to all these questions, you're just piecing it together. And so say that you have low numbers on all of these, well, then just maybe you probably do fit this category of I do, you watch, we talk. And if you are in low numbers, what I would do, the way I would approach it is helping your organization by me doing a lot of the work and you watching, and then us talking throughout that entire process until we get you guys to a place of you going to the next stage. And the next stage being I do, you help, and we talk. And so it's a progression game. But if you do have low scores in these areas, that's okay. That's just where you guys are starting. And I love this quote by Maya Angelou: you can't really know where you are going until you know where you have been. You can't really know where you are going until you know where you have been. And I think in the same way, you can't get to where you want to be until you first figure out where you are starting off. You can't figure out where you want to be until you first figure out where you were starting off. And these questions really help in figuring out where you're starting off in terms of being in the stage. If you have higher scores to these questions, then probably you are not in the specific stage. You're probably at a higher stage. And so those are stages that we're going to go through a little bit later. But if you are at this stage, it's okay, because you know where you're starting off. And that's the half of the battle, is knowing where you're starting off to then be able to progress forward. The cool thing about it is no matter what stage you're at, the steps that when I do individual assistantship or individual counseling or coaching or just individual services, I do the same steps, but same steps, different time frame. Same steps, different time frame. And that time frame is really based off of where you as an organization stand in terms of being able to evaluate your programs. And that's going back to these 4 different stages. If you are more at this stage 1 of I do, you watch, we talk, well, then what's going to happen is I'm going to have to allocate more time, which is okay. If you're at a different stage, a higher stage, I'm going to allocate less time. And so same steps, just different timeline. And so it's so important just to figure out where you guys are first to be able to, again, move forward. And so that's what these next 4 weeks are going to all be about. Just figuring out where you guys are at in terms of specifically evaluations. And so next week, what we're going to talk about is the stage 2. So I do, you help, and we talk, where it's not only you watching, but it's you helping and helping me to be able to conduct the evaluation or create the evaluation and conduct the evaluation, and then us being able to talk. But it always ends with us talking. And so we're going to go through just different questions, the same vein, different questions that can really be able to help you as an organization to figure out if you really are in this specific stage. And so the reason why I love these 4 weeks is because it really just practically helps you to figure out with sort of a not necessarily a bias, so I guess an unbiased manner of, but it's still based off your perspective. So I guess it could be both, but in some type of manner of where you guys are starting out, because then that's how I would be able to assist you moving forward. But more than me, it's for you to be able to assist yourself in figuring out what type of help do you need. But ultimately knowing, just going back to what I was saying in the beginning, that we're always going to need help. It's just figuring out what type of help we need. And so that is the last thing I'm going to say in this week. And actually, to add this on, so next week, we are going to be having a special guest come in. Her name is Kim Evans. She is amazing. And I've done a lot of work for her. And she's just going to come in and share some of the work that I've been able to do for her organization. And then on April 17th, we have another person from another organization I've been assisting coming in as well. And so I know I told you guys that was going to be happening. So it is going to be happening. And so next week, we're going to have Kim Evans. And then the week after, his name is Mel Wells. And so that is exciting for me personally, just to have them to come in. And so now, with that being said, I'm now open for any questions anybody has.
Always.
I love it.
I have 2 questions. Could you repeat those 4 stages? I got the first 3. Well, I guess the first 2, but the last 2. But if you wouldn't mind just repeating.
No, definitely. So the first one is I do, you watch, we talk.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is I do, you help, we talk.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is you do, I help, we talk.
Okay.
And then the fourth one is you do, I watch, we talk.
Ah, you watch. Okay. Alrighty. That sounds cool. And we talk. And then when you were explaining the presentation you're planning to make to the city officials.
Yeah.
And you said they asked you. Can you say what it was they asked you again for?
Yeah. So they asked us what evaluative tools can prove that we actually are worth this funding, basically.
So is that a question that is typically asked, or is that like a different level of funding where that question comes in? You know?
No, so I have heard that multiple times from specifically like city officials, but even more than that, they just want to know, like, are we giving to someone that's worth our funding? And so they just want to know, like, what work have you already done to show that we're actually giving to someone that's worth it? And so that actually has been a common thing. So even outside of city officials, there was this other organization called Uncommon Individual Foundation, and nonprofit. They just asked the same thing. They're business minded, business oriented, and they were like, we want to. They just say it in different terms, so you'll hear it in different ways. So city officials, they'll just be like, I just want my best bang for my buck. So if you can't really show me that, then I'm not just going to give to you. But the nonprofit was based on business. It was a return on investment. So I just want my ROI. And so if you could be able to show me that, that's what I want. So it's just different terms that all mean the same thing. It's just a different way that they say it. And so you're just learning the language of these people you're speaking to.
And so is the assuming, I'm going to assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
That do you have this process already, or you have this information available to them, or is this something that you have to put together?
So thankfully, we already have it available because I was putting it together over time. So, which is cool because if we do our jobs and we evaluate over time, once somebody asks, all I have to do, this is what I did. They asked me, hey, can you put your information on evaluations into this draft or into this letter? And so what I did was I went to my handy dandy Google Drive. I went to my report that I made. I just copied and pasted it and said, here you go. Wow. And so it was so easy because I was already doing it. It's as if you're just preparing for something. You're already fully prepared for a presentation. And so I already had all the information because I've been doing it. And so now I'm just handing it to them and saying, hey, these are the statistics. This is the ones that you want to highlight the most. And so I think that's the other part of it, is that I have the statistics. So now I can figure out which ones that are best to highlight for that person. But the problem is when you don't have it fully prepared, then you're going to try to present everything. And that's, they don't necessarily need to hear everything. They just need to hear the stuff that they really need to hear. And so we already had it together.
So that takes me back to the pre-conversation we were having when I was saying how organized I am and I have things together and blah, blah, blah. But if you don't know to have the information together, then those are the things that freak me out, that last minute stuff, because, I didn't realize I needed, an evaluative tool to, compile information, blah, blah, blah. So then you're up all night, trying to put something together and off of your Google Drive or whatever, versus, like you said, you've been working on it all along. And I personally had never really heard of any sort of evaluation processes as a formal,
Mm,
function until, this series working with
yeah.
you. I didn't know that that was a thing,
Yeah.
and you do the surveys and you say, did you like the camp? Did you have fun? And 12 people said yes, and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
to go into it the way you've been talking about is extremely helpful. And it just makes me realize how much more we need in terms of help. No.
No, and yeah, you just figure out what type of help. And I mean, ultimately, the way that it looks in that presentation, it seems as if like it's not a full evaluation,
Hmm.
because you present it in a way that's digestible. So I'll share my ice screen for an example. So when I present, I really am sharing these like graphs, and then I'll provide an explanation of the graph.
Okay.
But the graph is sort of do the explanation
Right.
yourself. But because people like graphics in the
Mhm.
presentation, a lot of times I'll just provide the graphic, and then they'll be able to interpret and be like, oh my gosh, like this is a good amount of growth that you guys have had. And so, but I don't show them like all of this. Like that's all the stuff that goes into it.
Okay.
um,
Gotcha.
but I just show them this. I just show them the result. And so it almost looks like it's not a full evaluation because you're just getting the result, but
Hmm.
you're not getting my whole process that I go through to do it. So
And do you create those graphs in the Google Doc, or did you create them like in Excel or something?
I created it in the Google Sheets.
Okay,
So,
yeah, Google Sheets, right? So based on that information, you just extrapolated it and made the graphs?
yeah, you can
Yeah.
just, so if you go like this and then you just insert and then chart, it'll come up.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
you get
Yeah.
good at Google Sheets.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah. Okay.
that's
That's
what,
awesome. Yeah, that was awesome. That I'm looking forward. I'm gonna have to miss one of the sessions. I think the last one. But maybe not. I
no,
can.
no worries. Yeah, I'm definitely going to send the recording either way.
Well,
So
I like asking questions, so I like doing it live.
no, I love having you live, to be
Thank
perfectly
you.
honest.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
and I'll let you guys know how the presentation goes too. Just
Awesome.
yeah,
Is that coming up? Like
yes, next Wednesday.
next Wednesday? Okay. All
So
right.
yeah,
We'll
that'll
be
be.
praying. I'll be praying for you too.
Thank you so much.
Presentation. Yes. All righty.
Awesome. Well, it's great talking to you, Monica.
Thank you.
Have a
Well,
great
have yourself a wonderful Easter weekend.
yes,
We'll see you next week. Yeah.
definitely. See you next
Um,
week.
thank you so much. Bye bye.